Strategic Failures by The Wizard of Pause. Thomas Edison, when working about the light bulb, said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." When working with companies all over the world, I've come to the realization that the link between the strategy and execution was problematic. In addition to the ones I've personally been aware of, I found out this is a subset of problems. So what I'm giving you is a sample, as there are many more examples of how strategies have failed. Arguably, one of the biggest mistakes a business can make is failing to learn from their mistakes. Failure is an opportunity to make a strategic pivot and catapult the business in the right direction or to innovate its offerings based on what it learned. For example, Compaq spent many years developing its own proprietary components. They wanted to make their desktops and laptops premium products. Kodak, on the other hand, did an overpriced acquisition. The idea was that drug research and Kodak's own chemical production would go hand in hand. What they hadn't vouched on was trying to understand and get ahead in the pharmaceutical business that they didn't know. Borders, on the other hand, failed to adapt to the digital age. They ignored changes in consumer preferences and had some questionable interactions with Amazon. So learn to predict and adapt to changes. Just because you've dominated a market for many years doesn't mean that you won't be able to innovate anymore. Startups are sprouting left and right and are ready to disrupt anything old and traditional. It's not the time to be complacent. Sears, on the other hand, lost sight of what they did well. Namely, they worked as a marketplace without brick and mortar stores. Everybody remembers the Sears and Roebuck catalogs. On the other hand, Abercrombie and Fitch got out of touch with the people that had always bought their clothes. Another wrong strategy is people like to buy into a brand, and JCPenney had lost theirs. They did two pivots in recent years. One was targeting a more upscale audience through their offering of a wider selection of brands, and another was pushing the image of being a discount store for middle America. Another wrong strategy is ignoring the competition. Competition is healthy. Having other companies also offering the same services that you do keeps you focused and motivated to always up the ante. You can always learn new things from your competition, especially from a young company who's about to disrupt your market. And if you can't beat them, acquire them. Don't underestimate the competition, even if they're small and just starting up. There are already lots of stories about up-and-comer companies looking for partnerships with big companies who got turned down because the CEOs didn't think they needed them. And a classic example is Yahoo not buying Google. So another example of strategic failures have to do with having the wrong people. If you don't have the right people involved, those charged with executing the plan to be involved from the onset. Those involved in creating the plan will be committed to seeing it through execution. So that means that you have to have team involvement. Strategy is tricky. It's both a thing and an action. As a thing, a vision, a direction, everyone in the company owns a strategy. As an action, it requires specific people to carry it out within the organization. This strategy is the best way to achieve our goal. Do we even know how to do this? Or have we researched this fully? Are questions that people need to be able to answer. No champion in leadership, or having the wrong people in leadership positions. Management must be willing to make tough decisions to ensure the right individuals are in the right leadership positions. That is, the right individuals include those who will advocate for and champion the strategic plan and keep the company on track. Business owners, CEO, presidents must be fully committed and fully understand how a strategic plan can improve their enterprise. Without this knowledge, it's tough for them to stay committed to the process. And then be tough once the plan is developed and resources are committed, and ensure there are consequences for not delivering them on the strategy. And don't forget, planning equals change. And in the plan that's developed, each leader must commit to changing. What will be our response to underperformance? You have to define that. Weak leadership results in improper resource allocation or lack of buy-in, poor follow-through, inadequate checks, misaligned goals, strategies, and actions, inefficient rewards and punishments, and cover-ups. We are all called to lead from wherever we are, even if we're not at the top. Titles associated with leadership must have the authority. Alignment of incentives with strategy. For example, you don't want to reward work instead of success. That just leads to busy work. So you have to develop actual and potential measures of success. So what are some of the reasons for a resistance to change? Well, let's start off with if your key people don't agree with your strategic decisions, they are unlikely to carry them out effectively. Having a strategy is useless if your team does not understand it, agree with it, or is incapable of implementing. That is, having the right people in the right place is absolutely critical. So you have a flop because these individuals resist the change. There can be sound reasons for the resistance. Sometimes a strategy might make sense at the highest level, but its full impact on the whole organization has not been fully considered. A big one is people just fear change, as it impacts what they've grown comfortable with. They're very knowledgeable about what they're currently doing, and they have no idea what their future is going to look like. Next, you may have cultural factors, that is, how people do their job. For example, marketeers may typically move from brand to brand over a typical 2-year cycle, while at the same time, operations executives ants at a much slower pace, and they steady at a 5-year pace. Next, we have unwillingness or inability to change. So your company and your strategic plan must be nimble and must be able to adapt as conditions change or respond to the inability to make changes. The next one is passive management. Don't assume that things will run themselves after they get started. All talk and no action, or failure to assign and hold individuals accountable for delivering the assignments, can lead to failures. In addition, management itself may be really good at defining strategy, which is normal, but not good at managing the implementation or execution of that strategy. And here's a big one. What's in it for me? What's my motivation and my personal ownership involved? People are looking for the meaning in what they do. You, personally, must desire the outcome. There's a lack of buy-in from the team because of this. A common mistake here is to underestimate the size of your team when it comes to having them buy into the plan. Often we see strategy leads doing a great job of gaining support from their immediate colleagues and direct reports, but a lousy job of ensuring that support cascades throughout the entire organization. And staying the course is another tricky one. People want to stick to their routines, they know what they're doing, and sometimes this strategy makes business underestimate the impact of market changes. When your field undergoes rapid changes, sometimes you have to go with the current model just to stay afloat and then slowly migrate to the new model. The next one is a lack of focus. So this lack of focus is impacted by allowing the strategy to shift over time. So you want to make sure you get the right product to the right customer at the right time. Now that's easy to say and sounds pretty good, but in reality, any large company has multiple products to sell to multiple customers in multiple geographies. So this is a non-trivial problem. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. So if you're not paying attention, you can lose track of where you are. Atari, for example, concentrated more on fighting anybody who touched their system. They forgot to keep their video game quality in line with the latest technology. The next one is related to that, in that you lose sight of what you're good at. So you have a failure to focus. In the drive for diversification, companies often ignore their core competencies. One of the biggest factors is executive inattention. It's been found that less than 15% of companies routinely track how they perform over how they thought they were going to perform. This goes back to the old line of what gets measured gets done. Everybody needs to know what they're expected to do. So you want to make sure there are clearly structured plans with well-written objectives. Each of them have a clear link to the vision of the organization or what you're trying to accomplish. They contain a clear action, a verb, a metric where possible, as well as tightly defined window of execution, basically a start and end date. They should have a single owner or captain. Others can and should collaborate, of course, but a single owner avoids ambiguity. And they were reported on a bare minimum of monthly at regular strategy sessions or board meetings. The next one is having too many goals. Having too many goals or even conflicting imperatives create a situation where everything is a priority. In that scenario, nothing really gets accomplished. Business owners must know how to select, prioritize, edit, and delete. The next one is unrealistic goals or a lack of focus and/or resources. Strategic plans must be focused and include a manageable number of goals, objectives, and programs, as well as a time frame. Fewer and focused is better than numerous and nebulous. Also be prepared to assign adequate resources to accomplish those goals and objectives as outlined in the plan. The next one, and a very big one, is failure to execute. Studies have found that 2/3 to 3/4 of large organizations struggle to implement their strategy. The key reason is they don't know how to execute effectively. They know how to come up with great strategies, but getting it done is the challenge. They know how to decide a plan, but very little about how to carry it out. Execution is a process that reinforces the ability of people throughout an organization to synchronize, know what to adjust for, make good decisions, and know when to feed information back into the system for fine-tuning. Strategic planning should be an ongoing process, not an annual event. Your strategic plan should be updated every 90 days to ensure relevance with the competitive environment and to align your staff at the beginning of every quarter. At the end of every quarter, review and debrief your actual results. Incorporate what you've learned and take the necessary corrective actions to improve your strategy and execution for the following quarter. Don't forget the plan. Have a separate the executive meetings about operation from those focused on strategy. Close the strategy to performance gap through better planning and execution. What we have here is a failure to communicate. And communication is important. If you don't have the ability to communicate strategy, you're not going to get people to buy into your strategy, and that's essential to implementing it effectively. They're not going to be able to translate the strategy into a purpose. Enterprises need an enduring purpose to inspire and motivate their people, instill a sense of purpose. They're not going to have the ability to fix accountability. And accountability in this case should be tied to results, not activities, because you can go around spinning round and round and round and get nothing done. First one is poor communication. Brings about the failure to communicate the vision and strategic objectives to stakeholders. It may mean that the developers of the strategy aren't getting out enough information for folks to understand what they're supposed to do with it. Expectations and opinions need to be shared openly, thoroughly, and effectively. Every tactical action supporting the strategic objective needs to be included in an overall communication plan so the strategy can be reinforced. And you now can tie the strategy to activity. One of the things is a barrier. Companies often go wrong by creating a cultural distinction between the executives who design the strategy and the people lower down in the corporate hierarchy who carry it out, which shows a lack of support for the strategy. So meetings between the executive team and unit managers should be regular and ongoing. But in addition, middle and lower level managers need to communicate their dependencies clearly with one another and agreements on how to work together. If you don't address this, you're going to have failures in the communication. The lack of alignment is where you get the value stream, where you tie the strategy to the activities necessary to succeed. This means that everyone in the organization can clearly and accurately articulate how their own set of goals and tasks are contributing to this value stream in the strategic plan. It is not unusual to see a loss of momentum. You often see plans kicked off in a flurry of workshops and activity, only to see the communications trail off rapidly as people return to business as usual activities. So you need to have regular meetings to change the organization, not just talk about it. This is where the quarterly meetings come into play. You have to schedule regular strategy meetings. Again, this is the strategy, not the operational side. Maybe even have half days to work on the strategy. And maybe even have a third party to act as the mentor to follow the strategy. Plan for plan's sake. Winston Churchill is credited with saying, "He who fails to plan is planning to fail." A corollary to that is, the thicker the plan, the more likely your failure. In addition, having a plan simply for plan's sake is also problematic. Some organizations go through the motions of developing a plan simply because common sense says every good organization must have a plan. But just like most plans, most everything in life, you get out of a plan what you put into it. So you have to link the strategy to a plan. If there's no plan behind the idea, it won't work. A strategy document almost never actually states what is to be done from day to day and a way for employees to track their actual progress. Ideas are easier to talk about than to do. And many executives are very good at creating strategies, but don't know how to turn those into actual execution. So a lack of alignment occurs. The alignment means that everyone in the organization can clearly and accurately articulate how their own set of goals and tasks are combining to the strategic plan. This is how you focus your plan on particular value streams. A budget by itself is not a plan, but it is a part of the plan. The planning process should be expected to identify the people, the processes, and programs that no longer serve the enterprise or are inefficient. But in addition, it will identify those that are tied directly to the execution of that particular strategy. Writing a plan and putting on the shelf is as bad as not writing a plan at all. If a plan is to be an effective management tool, it must be used and reviewed continuously. Not understanding the environment or focusing on the results causes problems. The planning teams must pay attention to changes in the business environment, set meaningful priorities, and understand the needs to pursue. This is why you have to meet on a quarterly basis to make it happen. Plans fail simply because they don't get communicated to all the people involved, which requires frequent communication to all of the individuals on at least a quarterly basis. Make sure that the first time your team hears about the plan also is not when it's finished, but as they're building it. They need to understand the organization's strengths and weaknesses and have their input into it. They have to have partial ownership. Many times, everyone gets caught up in the excitement of the new, and they forget to allow enough time to properly manage existing business activities. So you must include business as usual activities as a part of your strategic plan. In theory, a well-written plan with clear focus areas should encompass the vast majority of the business as usual activities. Rank them with their relationship to the strategy. So you must pay attention to your environment. Number one problem is a failure to move with speed and pace. When the news is bad, acting sooner is much better than acting later. Number two, succumbing to the short term. Companies are under pressure to show returns and impress shareholders. Try to stay on track and prioritize long-term investments over short-term gains. Number 3, failure to pay attention to external trends. Not properly tracking customer needs or understanding competitor moves will trip even the best strategies. Boy, the number 3, failure to iterate. More projects have failed because they tried to do too much at one time. It's very disruptive to existing processes, and it's very expensive and very lengthy. I heard one company that had one project that cost them several $1,000,000, and the return on investment would take them years to recover from that. Number 4, while companies are busy trying to update things and create new things, they lose the ear to the ground. They got to listen to threats and opportunities and move quickly to adjust plans accordingly. But avoid changing plans so much or so regularly that you lose credibility with your own people. Avoid a lack of strategic focus. You want to clarify your growth strategy, your purpose, your vision, your brand promise, and never lose sight of that. You want to create a feedback loop. This is the heart of the IVRA model, as feedback systems are inherently more stable. Yet companies rarely track performance against long-term plans. So go back and compare the business results with the performance forecast for each unit in its prior year's strategic plans. You will find that multi-year results rarely meet projections. That's why you want to assess performance frequently, to make minor adjustments rather than major adjustments. You want to measure actual and potential progress. You regularly plan assessment at much more frequent intervals than you've done in the past to get this information. The goal is to provide real-time feedback. Unanticipated circumstances and events will require strategic replanning, but brute force adherence to the original plan will not succeed. Be sure to pay attention to input from the teams themselves executing the strategy. They're closest to actually what's going on. And failure to celebrate success. Don't fail to recognize the great things that you've achieved along the way. That brings us up to having the right strategy to succeed. Well, first, you want to respond to the market. Failure to respond to the structural changes in the market can cause you all kinds of problems. When something new comes along, it is therefore advisable to make structural changes quickly, no matter how painful the adjustments are. So don't discount potential problems. Don't bury your head in the sand when it comes to marketplace realities. And don't discount potential problems because they have not had an immediate impact on your business. Plan in advance and you'll be ready when the tide comes in. Next, develop a model for execution. Have a model identifying the critical variables that define, at least for the manager, the things they have to worry about when they put together an implementation plan. When doing your analysis, be sure to address big issues. People often fail to spend time reaching agreement on the current situation and its problems. So be sure to talk about all obstacles to high performance. As Yoda said, do or do not, there is no try. No one can serve two masters at the same time. Technically you can, but it'll be difficult to give your full attention to both. It's important that you focus on a single priority for your business at a given time. Be sure to see that you're not forsaking one priority over another. The next area is quality over quantity. Generally, businesses who sacrifice the quality of the product or service in meeting the demands of the market are faced with lots of problems later on. But sometimes growth is inevitable. To be ready, set a high-quality management system right from the beginning and continually improve upon it even if you think it's perfect. Customer feedback is important. After all, you're in business to sell to customers. In today's ever-connected world, getting feedback from customers has never been easier. Create channels where customers can report their problems with you, your products, or your service. Conduct surveys to know your customer experiences. And one of the last ones is act immediately on a problem. When an issue arises, Don't hide it from your other customers. Instead, make it public. Tell them you're already looking to a solution. Keep your ego in check and admit that there's a problem. It's your responsibility to make sure your product or service is working as advertised. Thank you. I am the Wizard of Pod. My name is Richard Halter. Please check out my book, Art for Retail, using technology to turn your consumers into customers and make a profit. It's available on Kindle. Thank you.